right? Okay. So D1 shows an individual initial demand curve for transport, right? So this outer D1 is the initial demand for public transport. So you have price of public transport on the y-axis, quantity of public transport on x-axis. What would cause the demand curve to shift to D2, D1, right? So what will cause the demand curve to shift to D1, D2? The cost of running the individual car increases. Now the individual is banned from driving. The price of public transport rises. The quality of public transport declines. Right. So students, what could be a reason for the demand curve shifting from D1 to D2, right? What could be the reason, right? Let me, if you can't see this clearly, let me make a new graph for you, right? So this is the, this is the shape of, right? Okay, have a look at this. So this is the shape of the demand curve shown in the question, right? So original demand curve was this, right? So original demand curve was this, right? D1, right? And then the demand curve shifted like this, right? So the next demand curve, the new demand curve is like this. Now the question says, and this is the demand for public transport. So the question asks you that what could be a reason for the demand curve to shift from this original D1, which is the outer one, to this inner one, which is D2. So what could be the reason for this? So why might the demand curve have shifted inwards, right? So first of all, you tell me that what can you see? Is this increase in demand or decrease in demand, right? So if the demand curve shifts like the way you can see on the graph, I want you to tell me whether you will classify it as increase or decrease, right? The demand is same. Okay, how many of you think the demand is same? First of all, tell me, right? How many of you think that if there is such a shift, the demand curve is the same? Yeah. So, okay, now let's have a look at this. Technically, it's not same, and the demand has decreased. How do I know this? Think about this. So if I choose any price level, right? So let's say this was the price level, P1. Originally, the demand at this price was how much? At this price level P1, students, right? The demand for D1 demand curve, which is this one, was let's say 100, right? At this price, there used to be 100 journeys per month, per week, whatever. But now at this price level, can you see with the inward shift in demand curve, the quantity of journeys has reduced. Similarly, I can choose another price level to show you, but I think you would have gotten the idea, right? So if I choose this price level, have a look at this. At this new demand curve, you can see for yourself that there is lesser quantity being demanded. Whereas at the previous, for the previous demand curve, there was a greater quantity being demanded. So they've just made the demand curve in such a way to confuse you. Are you getting me? Because in our classes, we have always discussed that decrease in demand should be parallel. How many of you got me, right? In our classes, we have always looked at decrease in demand or increase in demand as parallel shift. So I totally, I can understand that, this is the confusion. So if this is the demand and then it shifts to D2. So if it shifts leftwards, we'll say decrease in demand, vice versa, we'll say increase in demand, right? Right, yeah, we'll definitely. So whatever remaining topics are left, so Zohan, we will look at the syllabus and whichever smaller, bigger topics are left, not bigger obviously, but whichever small topics are left, we'll discuss all of those, right? Now, knowing that the demand curve has decreased, what should be the correct answer? Knowing, students, Khadija and Kizan, are you following me or not? Right? So knowing that the demand curve has decreased, can you tell me what should be the answer? Let me read the options for you if you can't read it clearly. The cost of running individual's car increases. The cost of running individual car rises and the individual is banned from driving. The price of public transport rises. The quality of public transport decreases, right? It should be D. It should be D, because if the demand for public transport is decreasing, there should be a reason for it. And one reason we can think of is deterioration in quality, right? Fazil, very nice. Khadija, did you get this? Right? So is the answer D, Zohan? Is the answer D? Okay. Okay. Very nice. Correct. Let's move on. Khadija, do let me know if everything is clear. If not, I'll explain you again. What would not affect the position of the demand curve for wigs? Right? Wigs, the wigs that people put on their head, right? What would not affect the position of the demand curve for wigs? So what should be the answer? Right? Right. Okay, that's interesting. Khizr, look at it one more time. So what should be the answer? Right. Right. Khadija, I'm just waiting for Khadija to answer and then I'll tell you what the correct answer is. First, let me ask you this thing. Which variable does not affect the position of demand or supply curve? Which variable doesn't affect the position, right? And that's correct, right? So it's the price of the product itself. Now, this is important, not the price of any other product. It's the price of the product itself that doesn't affect the position of the demand curve, right? So if there is a reduction in the price of wigs, then that would not affect the demand for wigs, like not the position of the demand curve. Like you will move from one point to another point on the demand curve. You'll move from one point to another point on the demand curve, right? So if let's say this is the demand curve you were operating on. So if the price, there's a reduction in price, so you'll move from a point higher on the demand curve to a point lower on the demand curve. But the position, this demand curve has stayed the same. Getting me? Right? Right? So it should be D. Right? So that's trick part. Right now, they deliberately gave you hairdressing, because when I looked at B, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But then I completely forgot that it's talking about wigs. It's not talking about hairdressing, because these are two different products. Wig is something that you put in hair, and hairdressing is the service that you get, right? So, I mean, so MCQs might appear easy, but sometimes they could be tricky. So you have to read it carefully. Why does an individual demand curve generally slopes downwards to the right? Why does an individual's demand curve generally slope downwards to the right? The additional satisfaction an individual gets from consuming most goods decreases as consumption increases. The additional satisfaction an individual gets from consumption decreases as income rises. The individual has finite income, which is used to attempt to satisfy many wants. For most people, the price charged by producers fall as quantity purchased increases. So what's the reason? So the question is simply asking you that why is demand curve downward sloping, right? Why is demand curve downward sloping? Right. Think about this, students. What year is this from, Zohan? If you can recall, what year is this question from? Okay. So Khizr and Khadija, what do you think? YT, YouTube. Okay, fine. No worries, no worries. If you don't know, no problem. Okay, so students, think about this. By the way, let me tell you, we haven't discussed this in class, but I'll explain you. This has been moved to A2 economics syllabus. So now this concept has been is part of A2 economics syllabus. But the reason, because think about this, the reason why demand curve is downward sloping, because what does it say? Slopes downwards from left to right. Now think about this. Do you see that whenever I draw the demand curve, I draw it like this, downward sloping from left to right, right? So that's what it's asking you simply, that why is demand curve downward sloping? Why is demand curve downward sloping? So you have price on the y-axis, you have quantity demanded on the x-axis. Now the question says why, explanation for demand curve being downward sloping. Now think about this, students. The reason is, so if you're operating, let me choose some random points over here, right? So let's choose some random points over here. So let's say previously you were operating on A, right? Now the point A, right? point A shows that you were consuming, the point A shows that, just a second, let's get stuck, right? So point A is showing that at a higher price, the quantity demanded, let's say the price of each unit of the good was 100 rupees and you were consuming 50 units. Now, when you move from point A to point B, that shows that your price decreased from, let's say, 100 to 80 rupees per unit, right? Now, price of each unit of the good is lesser and your consumption increased to, let's say, 50 to 90, right? Is it making sense? Now, in other words, a consumer, listen to this carefully, a consumer will consume more units of the good only when per unit price decreases. I repeat, a consumer would only move from point A to point B when the per unit price decreases from 100 to 80. Only then that consumer will consume more, right? Now, what's the reason for that? The reason for that is that your marginal utility diminishes, right? Now, what is marginal utility? Let's first talk about utility. So utility is a word that you will be exposed to in your A2 economics, right? Utility is the satisfaction that you get from consuming a product. Utility is the satisfaction. Why do we consume anything in this world? Why you eat food? Because that's body need, right? Why do you sleep? That's a need for the body, right? Why do you buy new shirts, new clothes? Because you like it, right? That provides you some satisfaction, right? Why are you taking my class? You want to get yourself educated, go and professionally excel in whatever you do next. I mean, everything that we do in our lives is providing us some utility, some satisfaction. Are you following me? Now, marginal means additional. Now, you must have noticed this is not something that's only related to economics. This is something that we observe in our daily life, right? That whenever we consume more units of one thing, each additional unit gives us less satisfaction. Every time we consume one more unit of the good, that gives us lesser satisfaction. Like if you're really hungry, you come back home and you are like, I'm ordering myself a pizza. So a pizza comes in, you're excited, you eat the first slice, you love it, right? But for the second slice, I mean, you will not have that much craving. I mean, obviously you will, but not as much as the first one. And after eating the second one, the third one will give you a little lesser satisfaction. And that is when you realize, oh, perhaps I should stop after third or perhaps fourth, right? But you don't go on to consuming unlimited quantities of anything. Yes or no? More you consume, the less satisfaction you get. Total satisfaction will increase. Now, students, that's a good question. So Han is saying the more you consume, less satisfaction you get. No, 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 no. Now, here's the thing. Now, this might be a little tricky, but let me explain you, right? Now, total utility is different from marginal utility. Total utility means, right, the total satisfaction that you get from, a certain thing, right? Okay. Marginal utility means additional satisfaction from consuming one more unit of the good. The word marginal in economics always means additional, right? So what's the additional satisfaction that you get by consuming one more unit of the good? That's marginal utility, right? Now, what I was saying, have a look at this. The first slice gives you most pleasure. Do you agree with me? The first slice of pizza, when you are really hungry, will give you most satisfaction. It's not that you will not eat the second one. You'll also eat the second one because that's also giving you some satisfaction, but not as much as the first one. That's all what I'm saying, right? Are you getting? Yes, I can definitely, right? After this. So additional satisfaction is decreasing. And therefore, for an additional unit of the good, now listen to this, students, carefully. Since additional satisfaction from each successive unit, additional satisfaction from each additional unit of the good is decreasing. Therefore, you as a consumer are willing to pay something lower for the second unit compared to the first unit. Yes, when you stop eating, that's when your total utility is maximum, which means that the additional slice will give you no satisfaction. That will give you no satisfaction, right? So when you stop consuming something, that means you have already reached the highest point of total utility. Now, after this, your total utility will just decrease. So you never eat to the extent where, I mean, I don't want to say this, but when you throw up, right? You never reached the stage when you had to give up, throw up, right? So, I mean, you already know that now my stomach is all full. I'm good. I'm satisfied. So let's stop eating. Yes or no? Are you getting me? Right? So additional satisfaction decreases. And we'll talk more about this in A2. Is it? Khadija, did you guys get this, right? So marginal utility diminishes, total utility increases. Right? Let me also write this down for you. So marginal utility means additional satisfaction from consuming one more unit of the good is decreasing, but your total utility is increasing. So when you reach the highest level of your total utility, you stop consuming that good. Marginal utility decreases, whereas 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 total utility increases, right? We're good. Okay, so perfect, right? So A is the answer. So let's look at the questions that Khizr has shared with us. Right. Right. Okay. Country X joins an existing custom union comprising Y and W, which has a common external tariff equal to X initial tariff. Interesting, very interesting. Country X joins an existing custom union comprising of Y and W, which has a common external tariff equals to X initial tariff. After joining the custom union, X imports cars from Y, which it previously imported from country V. How will this affect the price of cars in country X and the cost of producing the cars imported into country X? Okay, now this is interesting. Let's understand this. So previously there was a custom union between Y and W. Now X has also joined it. The common external tariff, what is common external tariff, students, quickly? The tariff that you impose on non-member countries. The common external tariff means the tariff imposed on non-member countries who are not part of that group, right? So previously X had that tariff imposed, right? Right? But now there is no tariff, right? Because now X has become part of that union. So after joining the custom union, X is importing cars from Y. X starts importing cars from Y, which it previously imported from country V. Previously, it imported it from country V. How will this affect the price of cars in country X and the cost of producing the cars imported into country X? And the cost of producing cars imported into country X. I would say it's D. Khizr, is the answer D? Khizr, is the answer D? Can you hear me? Yeah, sure. Take your time. Take your time. I just want to confirm it first before I start explaining because this is a little difficult one. Why is the part of custom union which gonna cause the extra import from Y without any tariff? Free trade. Won't the prices be lower? Right, I'll explain you why. Yeah, Azwan, that's correct. You are asking the right question, but I'll tell you why is that the case. Right, so it's more like a language problem rather than something else. I'll explain you why is that the case in case that option is correct, which I'm not sure yet. Okay. Meanwhile, let's say uh, we get to open the past paper, right? So, mhm. So we can start off with, in the last class, we were doing 16, right? May, June 16. So let's do May, June 17 today, right? This is not the site I was looking for. This is the one, right? So let's do May, June 17, right? Right, and May, June 17. Here it is, and then we go. Let's do 1, 2, and question marking scheme 1, 2, and question paper 1, 2, right? So here we are, right? Okay, just give me a second. Let me download both. Just a second. Present. That's the problem with these websites. Answer is B. Okay, okay. Just give me a second. Okay, so the answer is B. Okay. Uh, Country X joins an existing custom union comprising Y and W, which has a common external tariff equals to X initial tariff. After joining the custom union, X imports cars from Y, which it previously imported from country Y. How will this affect the price of cars in country X and the cost of producing cars imported into country X? Right? So, common external tariff. Now there's no tariff, right? After joining the custom union, X imports cars from Y, country V. So it's that free. It's custom. So there's no tariff now, right? So the price should be lower. Okay. Right. So previously there was a tariff. Now there is no tariff. So it should be lower. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And why is the cost of production higher? Because cost of producing cars imported into the country. The cost of producing cars imported into the country X. We, after tariff, they were able to import from it, but yeah, okay, let's do it. And they're importing, so cost of production is higher. Okay, let me explain you. Students, have a look at this. It will require some calculations. I mean, it's a, as I said, it's a difficult one, but have a look at this, right? So there are how many countries involved? There are 4 countries involved, right? So country X is the one that we are deciding for, right? Then there are 2 more countries that are already part of the union. It's Y and W, right? So they're already part of custom union, right? Okay, now the thing is that custom union is a group of countries which do not have trade barriers from trade barriers for their own member countries, but they do have a common external tariff for non-member countries. Are you getting me? So no barriers, trade barriers for member countries, but common external tariff for non-member countries, right? Okay, now think about this. Before X was part of this custom union, before we are talking about, right? So before, what's the idea here? Now you have to be careful with the language. Before, X was importing cars from we, right? And it said that there was X initial tariff, right? X had some tariff imposed on the products, right? So whatever products were coming into X had some tariff imposed, right? So let's assume that tariff was 10%. Are you getting me? So let's assume that tariff was 10%. Students, are you following me? Right? How do I know this? Have a look at this. Let's look at the wording one more time, right? It says which has a common external tariff equal to X initial tariff, X initial tariff. So this means this is the tariff that X has imposed on other countries. Be very careful with the wording, students. Country X joins, I'm reading the first statement here. Country X joins an existing custom union comprising Y and W, which has a common external tariff equals to X initial tariff, which means what? That X had also tariff imposed. So custom union was imposing a tariff of 10% on all the non-member countries like all the non-member countries outside these two. They had a common external tariff of 10%, and X also had 10% tariff on other products on imported goods imported from outside X. Right? Easy? Is making sense. Now let's assume the price of car in V was 100 and the price of car for Y was also 100. The car price for producing, I'm taking a very simple values to make our lives easier, right? So it was $100 production cost for V, right? And $100 production cost for Y. Then think about this. If the cost would have been the same, right? Then technically X would have been indifferent importing from any country. No, I'm talking about before, Zohan. This is before, because it says before X imported from V, right? Before X imported from V, right? Yes or no, right? Now with 10% tariff, right? So V, is this clear, Zohan? V car would have costed X how much? The car that you're importing from V would have costed 110, right? Because 10% tariff, right? And similarly, the car imported from Y would have also costed, the car imported from Y would have also costed you the same, right? $110. Are you guys following me? $110. But why was X importing from V and not Y? Are you getting me? Is everyone getting this so far or not? Right? I'm just giving you an example. Right? We are just taking hypothetical examples. We don't know. And now I'll tell you how do we know. Right? Students, is this making sense or not? Right? Read the statement. After joining custom union, X imports cars from Y, which it previously imported from country V. So if it was previously importing from country V, X had the same tariff for everyone. So the reason why it was importing from V was because its price was not 100, but its price was something less. Students, are you getting me or not? So its price was perhaps, let's say $90 or something less. That's why with 10% tariff, so what's 10% of 90? 99, right? 9, right? So that will make it 99. So this is costing X lesser than importing from Y. Is everyone clear so far? Yes, V cars were more competitive in the market. Khatija and Khizr, are you guys following me? So let's look at the story one more time. Before X joined custom union of Y and W, right? It does tell us in the question that the custom union common external tariff, which these two countries were imposing on other countries, was the same as X initial tariff. But X was importing cars from V, right? So initially we took the example that cost of producing cars in V was also $100 and the cost of producing cars in Y was also $100. So if the cost of producing cars in both countries if the cost of producing cars in both countries would have been $100, then technically these both, for X, both of these two options would have costed 110. then why didn't X import from Y and from V? So the reason was simple, because the cost of producing car in V was something less, right? 90. So with 10% tariff on 90 is 99, whereas 10% tariff on 100 with 10% tariff is 110. Gotcha, right? Is it simple? Okay, now moving forward from here, right? When X became part of the tariff, now this is after, sorry, part of the custom union, right? Now within these three products, within these three countries, there will be no trade barriers at all. So X, W, and Y will trade freely without any trade barriers. Now X started importing cars from Y, right? So $100 means $100, no more, right? Because there are no tariffs. But I mean, the car that's being imported, I mean, the example that I took is slightly rough. The car that you're importing, that now X would be importing from V, would be costing you more, right? So if I would have just tweaked this a little differently, right? So let's say it's 92. So what's 10% of 92, right? So this would have made, you're getting my point, right? So this would have made 10% of this, 9.2. So 9.2 into 92. What's 9.2 into 92? Right? So if you add 9.2 into 92, 9.2 plus 92, right? That gives you 101, right? That gives you 101.2, right? So I've changed the values a little bit to suit our, Now think about this. After X has joined custom union of Y and W, right? So $100 car of Y will cost you the same $100 because there are no trade barriers. Whereas the car being imported from V, since there is still a common external tariff, that would cost them $101.2, right? So coming back to the point, X will start obviously importing from Y. Easy, right? Now comes in the main question. Just a second, Juan, stay with me, right? Now comes in the question, how will this affect the price of cars in country X? Did the price fall, right? Did the price fall, students? Right? Now it's costing 100. Previously, it was costing them 101.2. So the price of cars in country X, it did, Zwan. Have a look at the values. Previously, you were importing from B. With $92 initial price and 10% tariff, it made it 101.2. Now, you're importing from Y without any tariff, and that's $100. So 100 means 100. Previously, you were importing for 101.2. Now you're importing for 100. Didn't the price fall in country X? Didn't the price fall in country X? Okay, let's look at this one more time, students. Let's look at this one more time, right? Let's look at this one more time, right? Now stay with me, right? This is country X, Y, and Zohan. I want you to pay attention, right? Y and W are part of this custom union. Easy, right? Now, the idea is that the custom union has common external tariff for all countries which are not part of the union. Confusion? Any confusion about this, right? Right? Okay. And X also had a tariff imposed for all other countries in the world. I repeat, Y and W are part of custom union. Among themselves, there are no trade barriers, but all the non-member countries' products are subject to 10% tariff. Easy? Any confusion? X is an independent country that operates independently, but X also has tariff for all other countries in the world. X is an independent country, but X also has tariff imposed for all other countries in the world. Now, there comes in another country, which is V. Now, X is importing cars before, I'm talking about before custom union was made. Before custom union was, before X joined the custom union of Y and W, X was importing the car from V. Now, the example that we assume that the price of car in V was $92, whereas the price of car in Y was $100. With 10% tariff, how much would a car cost to X importing from V? So 10% higher of 92% is how much? 10% higher of 92 is $101.2, right? So when X used to import cars from V before tariff with 10% tariff, right? At a price of $92, that costed them 101.2. Whereas importing car from Y would meant that it will cost them $110 because 10% higher of this is 110. Yes or no? Easy. After X moved to this custom union, now within the trade of these products, there is no tariff. So X started importing cars from Y because $100 meant $100, no tariff. Whereas still, since V is an outsider, importing car from V would mean it would still be subject to tariff. So it will still cost them 101.2. Now, previously, X imported car from V and the total price X consumers had to pay was 101.2, right? Now they're importing from Y and the total cost, like the total price they have to pay is $100 only because there's no tariff. So before the price was higher, now after joining the custom union, the price is lower. Yes or no? Easy, right? And what about the cost of production? Students, what about the cost of production? Which of the two countries had lower cost of production? We or Y? Which of the two countries had lower cost of production? Right? So we had lower cost of production. So after joining the, after becoming part of the custom union, the cost